What's going on, everybody? I wanted to do a video on training frequency. This is often a question that I will get from people is how often should I be working out? What's optimal? What's the bare minimum that I need to do so I can yield some good results? And when it comes down to training frequency, that can be defined as how often am I working out during the week? And then you take a step further is how often am I training a particular muscle group during a length of time? And when it comes down to it, training frequency really depends on the person. What's realistic for them to stay adherent to, because ultimately if I tell somebody they need to work out 5 days a week and they can only dedicate 3, I've already set them up to fail. So that is a big question, is what's realistic for them to be adherent to. Once we've kind of laid out what that is, then we talk about how frequently are they training each muscle group so that they can yield the best results. So I'm going to go over a couple studies, but when you look at people going to the gym, I used to be one of these people where I'd have international chest day, I have arm day, then I'd rotate and do chest day. Like, I literally would not do legs, or I would very rarely do legs. But when you look at people that train the same way, they have very impressive like chest or arms, whatever they're training frequently, you see like, wow, like it's very impressive. And we often make fun of them because they don't have any legs or whatever the case may be, but it really does point to training frequency plays a big role when it comes down to, building up your physique and putting on lean muscle tissue. So, but am I supposed to work out 4 or 5 times a week, all my major muscle groups, so I can get the same results as these people that are training chest and arms so often? And so that's why I wanted to go over a couple studies that I came across. Both of them were done in 2016. One of them is actually a meta-analysis done by Brian Schoenfeld. So I'll go over that second. But the first one was an 8-week study, and I'm actually going to put both of these in the description box below so you can take a look at them. I strongly suggest you reading through some of these, just so that you can kind of get some context around how they did it, like the method and really the conclusion that the results that they saw and some of the discussion parts of it. But basically, this study was called Increasing Lean Mass and Strength, a comparison of high frequency strength training to lower frequency strength training. So they wanted to see muscle gain and strength gain. And so they basically had a group of 7 women, 11 men, and they're about the ages of 28 to 40 years old. And they had at least 3 to 4 years of training experience. So they weren't just getting newbie gains out of this 8-week approach, which is good to see, because you might get some tainted data or just some data that really can't be used by somebody that's trained. So you can kind of take out that component, right off the bat. So they had 2 groups. The first group, what they did was they did 3 full body workouts during the week. They did 3 sets per muscle group, and so ultimately they did 9 sets per muscle group during the week. So group 2, what they did was they actually did a body split, and they did all 9 sets per muscle group on a particular day. So if they did chest and arms, they did a chest press, all 9 sets during that workout. The next day they did back, and then they did all 9 sets for that. So ultimately the volume was kept the same. It's just that the frequency of training that muscle group was a little different. So when you look at what they did, they actually did 8 to 12 reps per set. And when the person was able to do 12 reps, they upped the weight the next session. And so they were working within 75% to 85% of their 1 rep maxes. But ultimately, after that 8 weeks, the first group, they gained an average of 1.06 kgs of muscle. And then the second group was 0.99 kgs of muscle gain. So there really wasn't that big of a difference when it came down to how frequently they were training a muscle group during the week. And strengthen the chest press for group 1 who train frequently, like 3 times a week. It was a little bit better than group 2. So my guesstimation on why that was, or one of the contributing factors, is if you try to do 9 sets of chest versus just 3, you probably can push yourself a little bit more for 3 working sets versus all 9. That's a lot to do in one session. And so I believe that played a role. I really don't know, but I believe that probably did take a huge chest. I mean, chest is ultimately weaker than the other muscle groups, like especially legs. And that's when it came down to hack squat. Hack squat was done versus just squats, and the strength gain was about the same. So there really wasn't that much of a significant difference within that world, which is still pretty good. I mean, honestly, doing 9 sets of hack squats versus just 3, you would think the same outcome would happen with like it did with the bench press or the chest press. But I really don't know what played the big role, but I know volume definitely played. The way that they kind of structured it and kept it the same makes sense in a way that, hey, if you can get the same amount of volume done in one day versus spread across 3 days, then great. The ultimate thing is, I believe this can give people some sense of reassurance that, hey, if I can only dedicate a few days a week versus like 5 days a week like some people, I can at least I know I'm going to be able to get some good strength gain, and I know I'm going to get some good muscle gain. It's what I can be adherent to. So the other one was done by Brian Schoenfeld. Like I said, it was a meta-analysis done in 2016, and it was called The Effects of Resistance Training Frequency on Measures of Muscle Hypertrophy, a Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis. So what he did was he had 5 prerequisites. So like I said, I'm going to put the link in the description so you can take a look at those prerequisites for the study to actually be included in this meta-analysis. But ultimately, he had a total of 10 studies that fell into this, that made it past the prerequisites. And what he found was ultimately they had to be at least 4 weeks. And for it to be included. There's other factors, of course, but I believe that was a really good one just by the fact that it had to at least have some length of time where he can show that some progress can be made or some good conclusions can be made. So basically, when it came down to it, training major muscle groups 2 times per week was better than 1, but 3 times per week of hitting all your major muscle groups still remains to be determined. So there wasn't enough evidence to show that, hey, if I'm training 3 days a week, that's ultimately going to give me more results. The more, the better. But what he came across was it still remains to be determined, in that respect. And so this kind of correlates with the ACSM guidelines, the American College of Sports Medicine guidelines on how often somebody should be working all their major muscle groups. It should be a bare minimum of 2 days a week, and keeping the reps around 8 to 10 reps. And so it kind of falls into the same recommendations that the bare minimum can definitely yield good results. And ultimately, training more frequently doesn't mean you're going to get more results out of it. So there seems to be a sweet spot of like 2 days a week, hitting all your major muscle groups. But once again, it comes down to what's realistic for the individual. What are their goals? And playing around with, okay, now that we know how often you can train, now we can play around with muscle groups. And this is where you can get really personalized with the person, because some people we all have weaknesses or weaker body parts, and we have stronger body parts. So really trying to figure out what's the best approach when it comes down to how frequently they should be hitting a particular muscle group. This is where it becomes very fun and very individualized for the person. And you can't just talk about frequency. You got to talk about volume. You got to talk about intensity, because those are the other two pillars of putting together a very well designed program for an individual. It's not just about how often are they training, but how much are they lifting during these particular days, how much total volume are they doing for a particular day during a week, whatever the case may be, so that they can have proper recovery, they can have proper growth, so everything's working synergistically, versus I'm just gonna go off of what this person's telling me on social media that I'm gonna follow their program because they're jacked. But ultimately, like I said, it comes down to what's realistic for the individual, and according to these is training all your muscle groups twice a week. You can do it so many different ways, but it really comes down to what's realistic for that person. So like I said, I'm going to put down these two studies in the description box. But if you have any questions, any comments, by all means, please let me know. I wanted to do something a little different where I included some of the research, and I really enjoy reading these. So I'm actually going to put more of these in my future videos. So please let me know if there's any questions or comments, not just around training frequency, or maybe some upcoming things that you want to hear me speak about. All right, thanks for checking in.